first shot, of course, had Gladys Wanga, the woman representative of Homa Bay County, taking to her heels yesterday after the first tear gas canister was lobbed in Nairobi. How is that experience? Because even what we expected, the kind of demonstrations we saw in Kisumu, even before we come to this story about the envoys, and what we saw in Nairobi is not what we expected. Last week was a much bigger protest. In Nairobi yesterday it was much subdued. It was you, Esther Passaris, and a few other leaders, numbering less than 15 people.
Well, it was a numbering less than. You mean in total everybody who was protesting was less than 15?
In Nairobi we didn't see a crowd bigger than that.
We had a very big number of people in town. Of course, we know that the police blocked protesters within the estates, and the roads were blocked at various points. But we still had quite a number of people in town, and those who were there, we had several people, several leaders. So it was really a huge success, and we hope that Friday will be even much bigger.
You intend the feeling was that yesterday we had a reporter stationed along University Way and around the vicinity of Anniversary Towers, and his report is that the activity there was much more subdued in comparison to last week. So the question was, are you still hoping to continue come Friday, going back to the streets? The other big question was, where were the top NASA principals yesterday? People would have expected to see the presidential candidate and his running mate, and probably Moses Wetangula and Musalia Mudavadi out on the streets together with the protesters.
You don't always have your generals out on the war front. They will come, and the time will come for them to come out. It is not yet. We are building up. And that's why I'm telling you that Friday will be what has never been seen before. And then as we build up, you will see at which point they come in. So it will be much. And Fred, you must realize that yesterday we had a national protest, because this happened in several counties across the country. So I think that was also a major statement that Kenyans are determined. Kenyans who support NASA are determined to ensure that reforms are put in place before we have elections.
Okay. Yeah. So Friday probably we'll get to see more running from more Waheshimiwas even in the city.
Yeah, well, you'll get to see more Kenyans coming in, and and many more, coming in to lend their voices to this matter.
Okay, back to that story we just played on Citizen TV, that report by Silver Chebet. It's also the main headline on the front page of the Daily Nation. Envoys talk tough on poll risk of violence. It is one of those very interesting happenings, because we rarely see our own diplomats, our own ambassadors sent out by Kenya speaking on other big issues. We don't expect Bwananjeru Githai to see Bwananjeru Githai in the US commenting about the American politics. Yet, when it comes to the Kenyan case, heads of diplomatic missions are very vocal. They sound even like they're actually dictating or directing us on what to do. What do you say about that?
I think there are a few important points. One is that diplomats must understand that there is a dark cloud hanging over their head from their handling of the August 8th elections. As soon as the elections ended, they said, please, can you accept and move on. And I think they had eggs on their faces when the court said that these elections were actually a fraud. So they had actually given a clean bill of health to an election that ended up having a lot of illegalities and irregularities. So that is one, the fact that they actually have this very dark cloud hanging over their heads. And I think we must really say it honestly, that they should understand that a section of this country do not necessarily view them as non-partisan. There is a very strong feeling that they have taken sides.
So at least they do not have the moral authority to actually.
At least I can speak from my own perspective that from what they did on the 8th of August, they have lost some moral ground. They raised points. Points yesterday, and what I'd like to say is, if you went to the US or to the UK or to any of those European countries whose envoys were speaking, if an election is found to have had the kind of illegalities and irregularities that the Kenyan elections had, would they be moving forward with the same commission or the same body or the same people that conducted that election? Would there not be outcry for these people to resign? Would these people not even have resigned before anybody says anything? So why is it being shoved down everybody's throats that you, no, you guys do not touch the IEBC, do not talk about the irregularities, do not give conditions, just proceed to elections within 26 days. We are seeing the same tone that we had just after elections. You know, the elections were free and fair, accept and move on, and this is what Jubilee used in court to say that, oh, even the observer missions gave the election a clean bill of health, so it must have been clean. But then they raise a point such as
and we'll get to
the
that
matter
point.
on election laws.
Yes.
You know, you know, they have a good point.
Yes. Before we get to that, let me introduce Nixon Korir MP Langata. Karibu sana, good morning.
Thank you, good morning.
It's a pleasure, privilege to have you on the panel this morning.
Thank you.
At least now we have some balance. Because Nixon Korir is from the Jubilee.
I thought I was going to have a field day.
It is all those.
Well, short-lived.
But Nixon, of course, we're discussing about what the envoy said yesterday at Bomas of Kenya immediately after meeting the IEBC commissioners and the kind of statement they gave out. Gladys Wanga does not feel that they have the moral authority to tell us what to do. Do you agree with her?
I think what the envoy said is are good things, and they condemned both sides. If I might say that, in terms of warned. Actually, let me just use the word warned that we are 22 days to election, and one side of the coalition, the NASA coalition, is condemning and demanding some resignation from officers, senior officers from IBC, and they also say that it is not advisable to bring changes in law right now, while they actually did not condemn the changes that were being brought. They just said that they are talking about the time that we are bringing the amendments in Parliament, and I think I agree to them to some extent that one, they said we need a credible, free and fair election, which every Kenyan wants, and just like you know, I had one of the principals from NASA the other day saying you cannot change the rules of the game mid-game. We can also say you cannot change the referee mid-game. You know, we need to proceed. The reason why I think the envoy talked that way is because you know, we need to have a country after 26th. And they are concerned that with the violence and the demonstrations that are happening right now in the country, led by NASA Group, and they're also concerned, of course, with the legislation that are being brought now, that it might interfere with the election. But I want to say this. If you look at the amendments that are being brought right now, the proposals to have the powers of the chairman also be transferable to a vice chair in case the chairman resigns, which is a possibility. I don't see how that will affect election, for example, or affect the structure of IBC. Number two,
and we will discuss those amendments, because I've seen actually an advertisement from Parliament actually listing all those things and inviting people for the public participation, which starts today. We'll be discussing that in a short while. But from her claim that the heads of diplomatic missions do not have the moral authority to actually tell us what to do, given the statements they made immediately after the August 8th polls.
No, they carry weight, because in the past, even if you look at the fights that we've had as a country in terms of fighting for democracy and all those things, the envoys have participated. In terms of fighting for corruption, they have participated. They cannot be not important right now, because they are not favoring one side.
Yes. Days of Smith and Stone.
You know, and this is exactly what the point that he has said last, that they are not favoring one side. Envoys are important. I think there is no doubt about that. But when they seem to take sides, and this is the point that Dixon is also making, that because they do not support one side, when we feel, when there is a feeling,
underline that statement that they actually are apolitical, they do not support any side.
But this should be seen in action. You know, when it is seen that immediately after the election they say, you know, accept this and move on as soon as you can. I think this is the problem. But the problem is, do Kenyans feel that this, and in earlier days, you know, envoys were seen to be on the side of the people, you know, agitating actively for what is for what is right.
And that could be criticized because as activism, because in diplomacy you cannot just come and become an activist in someone's country.
And again, you know,
but the question is, the thing is, they raised quite some bit, and you must agree they raised some
and I did agree,
issues, yes,
yeah.
On both sides. That yes, you NASA on one hand, you appear like you're intent on paralyzing the IEBC, and they said that parties' requests, it would be practically impossible to satisfy all political demands. So the 11-point irreducible minimums by NASA, IEBC cannot satisfactorily comply with all that and still be in a position to conduct a political election. On the other hand, they said international standards, best standards, that you cannot change electoral laws a few days before the election. These are valid points.
Yes. So can we see progress? You know, they said, okay, you cannot change everything, but can we see some progress on the part of IEBC in terms of showing us that they're determined to make changes? For example, there are these officers who even the chairman, you know, said these people are liable, you know, they should get out of office. Mohati and his team, who actually created an account in the name of the chairman, these people are still in office. What are they doing there? And we should be, then we are being told, no, proceed into the election. And these guys who have actually, fingers have been pointed to, they have been found, you know, culpable. And the chairman himself has written to the CEO saying that I feel that these people should step aside so that we conduct this, so that we have people replace them. Replacing the CEO is no big deal. It's not something that requires Article 245. The CEO is not a commissioner, you know. And even the questions that the chairman himself raised with the CEO, and that he has not satisfactorily answered to our knowledge, I think there is a very big problem there. But the second thing I want to say regarding these amendments, and I know we're going to speak to them, but there's something Nixon said that I have to respond to. These amendments are not in good faith. For example, saying that the chairman, you know, should be able to give powers to the deputy chairman to be, you know, returning officer. In the event that the chairman is not there, the deputy should be able to come forward. We have seen Musando killed in this country. Jubilee should tell us why in these 60 days or in these 26 days are they, where do they think Chebukati is going to go? Or why would you bring amendments with this kind of weight in right in the middle of an election? Or do they want to Musando Chebukati?
That's a very serious allegation.
You know? And is this what we are preparing for?
No, but Nixon career, of course, yes, the envoys do raise some very serious issues.
Yes.
That both sides are digging in unnecessarily. 22 days to the election, that with a kind of grandstanding from both Jubilee and NASA, probably we're not going to have an election. We know where the problem is. We know, and the Jubilee knows by amending the electoral laws, they're creating a problem. NASA knows that by making this 11-point reducible minimums and leaving the table of negotiations with the IEBC, they're also creating a problem. 22 days to the elections. Are we not just shooting ourselves in the foot?
Let me say this. You know, we had an election that was nullified by the Supreme Court. There were reasons for nullification of the election. One of the reasons was not that there were votes rigged at the voting time. You know, the Kenyans went and marked the ballot papers. The counting was done. That the Supreme Court is saying because IEBC, for example, or some people did not give access to the server, there might be something that happened in the server, which Kenyans don't know. What we are saying is that what Mheshimiwa Wanga is saying is that there is no possibility of chairman getting sick. There is no possibility of chairman resigning. The other day when the Supreme Court ruling was being issued, there was one judge who was missing because he was sick. What happens if Chebukati tomorrow, I mean, is not a superhuman? With the pressures NASA is pressing on Chiloba, the next day you will hear that the chairman must resign, and he can actually resign. What will happen if the chairman resigns 20 days or 25 days or 1 day to election? What will happen? Will we go back to recruiting our chairman? Will we stop? Will the country pause because we don't have a chairman? What we are saying, what NASA is saying is that we don't want the electoral amendments, but they are not specifying which amendment will affect the election. What we need is a free and fair, credible election. We are saying in the amendments that that's one of the amendments. Number two of the amendment is that in case there is a problem, there is a dispute with the election, instead of just relying on the assumed issues in case there is a hacking of the server or failing the technology, we will go back to Form 34As that were signed by all the presiding officers and the agents of the aspirants. That is the primary document. And NASA is not telling us what is that, how is that affecting the election. That's actually giving clarity to the election. Anyway, let me just say, we are ready for an election. These legislations that we are bringing right now, unfortunately the Supreme Court gave us 60 days to go to an election. We are 22 days to election. Parliament has powers to bring legislations and amendments, new legislation and amendments. But NASA is saying, on the other hand, we are not willing to go to the Parliament. They want to demonstrate. They demonstrated yesterday, they demonstrated last week, they will demonstrate on Friday. The purpose of demonstration is to pass a message. We have the message, but the legislation will have to be brought through the Parliament or the changes.
And that's the fact that Jubilee, with the numbers they have, they're already conducting public hearings with regard to these laws. And there's an ad on page 17 of the Daily Nation. This is a paid up ad by the Republic of Kenya, 12th Parliament, so I can talk about it, explaining the election laws amendment bills of 2017. And they've actually taken a whole page to explain the meaning of the word chairperson, quorum and the conduct of business, nomination of a presidential candidate, electronic and manual transmission of results, use of technology, complementary mechanism, nullification of an election, procedure to be followed at a fresh election, offense of a presiding or returning officer. Now, if you've stayed away from Parliament, or you've stayed away even from discussing this,
let me say,
Jubilee will go ahead and make these public hearings with their numbers in Parliament. They'll go ahead and pass this. What happens next?
Let me say this first of all, that the Supreme Court did not nullify elections for lack of laws. I think we Kenyans must be clear on that. It is not because we did not have laws that the elections were nullified. It is not because the laws were ambiguous. It is not because Chebukati did not have someone to deputize him. It is not because the quorum for the commission was more instead of 5, or we said 5 instead of 3. It is not because of these issues that Jubilee is raising. Jubilee is raising these issues to send a signal to the judiciary and to everybody else that, you know, we have numbers, you know, we have power, you know, we have muscle, and we shall revisit. They have begun the revisiting. You know, this is out of anger, because none of these issues that are being raised was actually pertinent or a case or brought problems in the elections. Returning officers were meant to sign Form 34As. Presiding officers at the polling station, because this was the law, that presiding officers at the polling stations, you announce the results, you sign your results, you transmit your results simultaneously to the constituency tallying center and to the national tallying center. And so by the time that your form is coming, this result from the polling station has already been submitted, Fred. But what we saw was a violation of that law. People did not submit 10,000 forms from 10,000 polling stations. Let me just make this point and make it clearly. People did not submit forms from 10,000 polling stations, 34As. And this was the problem. So this is not going to be solved by amending laws. This should be solved by people actually, the elections being conducted as per the laws that exist. And let me say, because Nixon was not with us in the last Parliament, that these elections were as a result of very, very delicate negotiations. The election laws that now we see being amended in a rush.
But
and to show the bad,
you did not protect them enough.
To show the bad faith, was the fact that for us to arrive at these election laws, people sat at Windsor, Jubilee, NASA, people burnt the midnight oil, they brought a law to Parliament, which we did not even change a comma. We said, because it is negotiated, because the balance is too tight, let us have this law. The laws have not been castigated. All that has been said is the elections were not conducted as per law. Why don't we just go back and conduct elections as per law? And why don't we make, if we can amend laws, why can't we make corrections within IBC of the people who did not conduct? The problem is people who did not follow the law. So don't pretend by amending the law instead of dealing with the people who did not follow the law.
Nixon, election laws are for posterity. Of course, we're going to have elections after 26th of October. But these amendments, and according to Mheshimiwa Wanga, they do appear to actually target this particular election. We cannot be making election laws targeting one particular election and forget that yes, some of these laws were well thought out in a rigorous process, as she said. People, bipartisan views were considered, but this time around it appears it is a one-party system. You've decided to go it this way. We cannot be changing laws like this. Don't you agree?
It is not a one-party thing. You can see it is already in the newspaper. Public participation is invited. Number two, when you say that it is targeted for this election, what we are saying, for example, we are basing, you know, when something like cancelling and presidential election happens, there must be a mistake somewhere. Gladys has said 10,000 forms were not delivered, for example. We are making that a criminal offense for a PO and a returning officer. And a returning officer not to sign forms. It must be very clear to them that if you don't sign the form, this is the jail term.
Are you saying that was a loophole? Are you saying that was a loophole?
It already is an offense. It already is an offense in the Election Offences Act.
It is my
It already is an offense in the Election Offences Act to manipulate election results.
Yes. If you see, most of those forms she's arguing that they were not delivered, they're actually from NASA regions. What we are saying, these omissions or commissions might be guided by someone for the purpose of going to a Supreme Court again when they lose an election. If you had the ruling of Maraga, he said, I will do it again if this thing happens the same way. We cannot afford to go back to the election and do it the same way.
Okay, what about, because the question was, are they targeted at this particular process? What about the First Amendment, where you seek to change the meaning of the word chairperson of the commission, or the qualifications of the chairperson? Because in the recruitment of a chairperson, you have to qualify to be, you have to have the qualifications of a judge of the Supreme Court. If at all we wanted more people within the commission to have that kind of qualification, wouldn't it therefore be that yes, we put it in our laws that all commissioners need to have that kind of qualification going forward, so that all 7 of them can be chairman of the commission? Don't you think that going forward that should be it, instead of targeting this particular commission with only one person who has that kind of qualification? That means no one else in the current description can be chairman apart from Wafula Chebukati.
You see, right now we run a risk we have a risk if the chairman resigns a few days to election. We will not have an election because we will not have a commission. We will not have a national returning officer.
So you do agree this law is meant for this particular election and not other elections?
No, it is meant for other elections. That means in the future also, there will be no one person qualified to be a chairman only in a commission.
But that's not what is being amended there. What is being amended is...
Yes, it's the qualification of a person to be chairman.
If somebody has looked at IBC, has seen that there is no other person with qualifications of an advocate or a judge of the High Court or the Supreme Court, and they have seen that the commission as currently constituted does not have those... So then the law is being changed specifically to target this commission and this election on the 26th, and it must worry Kenyans as to where the chairman is supposed to be going in this 26th.
You know, Chebukati will not be there forever. He will not be there. He will not be the chairman of IBC in the next 100 years. This law can stand for the next 100 years.
But the question is, going forward, because it must have been well thought out. People must have actually had a reason why they put that kind of qualification for the chairperson of the IEBC, that you need to have qualifications of a judge of the Supreme Court. I'm sure it did not just come out of anywhere. So if at all we think that more people within the commission should be able to take up this position as chairman, don't you think that the best way should be that even in the recruitment, all 7 or 9 commissioners or 3 should have that same qualification, that they all have a qualification to be judge of the Supreme Court? Wouldn't that be an easier and better way to go about it?
It is easier to say that the chairman, the powers of the chairman can be transferred to the vice chair, whoever the vice chair is, regardless of the qualification they have, so that in case the chairman is not there, the vice chair can take that role. That's the same thing.
Yeah, but the chairman should have certain qualifications. To just throw those qualifications out and say that anybody, you know, with any qualifications can become... I think what we should be looking at really is, if we want to amend these laws for posterity, we should then be careful, you know, in not for this election, because this election, I think this is in bad faith. But when we look at the election laws as Parliament moving forward, we should state, just like the governor and the deputy governor must have similar qualifications, so that in the event of the absence of the governor, the deputy governor can take over and run. We should state in our laws, and this is when we review these laws in the future as Parliament that the Vice Chair and the Chair should really both have these qualifications of judge of the Supreme Court.
I think we are losing the point here.
No.
The issue here is not the qualification.
I'm just trying to make a point.
Of the chairman. The issue here is the continuity of an election in case the chairman is not there.
This particular election.
Yes? Not this, but any election.
What this law, we cannot be losing the point, Fred, because what the law is trying to do is to say that to remove the qualifications that the chair should be having and state that any other commissioner can actually become the chair without having those qualifications. And this is the rush that we are in, or Jubilee is in, to try and just do anything and everything. And this is the reason I was saying that Jubilee is acting in anger without thinking through the ramifications of such changes.
Okay. We'll continue discussing this issue about the amendments to the election laws. I'd like to hear views from Priscilla Nyokabi, former MP. I've seen her in studio.